Hello everyone and welcome to your astrological overview of the year 2023. Now before I begin, I would just like to say a couple of words about this year's 2022 because when I'm recording this, I'm still in 2022, and I would also like to apologize if I have a cough now and then because I'm coming down with this flu thing. So the year 2022 was really interesting and dual from so very many different ways. It felt like being caught between, the past and the future. Now, of course, this was depicted on the sky by the ongoing and long-term conversation of tension, the square of Uranus and Saturn. Uranus, of course, represented the future, the breakthrough, the quantum leap, everything going forward. Let's aim, for the future. And Saturn represented usually the past and also the present, everything that still needs to change, everything that still needs to be resolved, and in certain ways, everything that still needs justice to take place, to give it a resolution. The past was also highlighted by Jupiter's transit and then meeting with Neptune in the sign of Pisces. That was really important because that was a big karmic culmination for us collectively, but also individually. So very many things did happen in our lives, one way or another, where it promoted either situations from the very distant past, resurfacing family dynamics, family conflicts, family karma, relationships, past relationship, marriages, mental health, emotional problems, everything, that kind of is always in the invisible, or in the visible, it means within us. It's not just palpable. So both Jupiter and Neptune, their meeting, really stirred up all these things. So this really added a almost like a heavy karmic nuance to it, and it also manifested quite physically, like the big floods in Australia and droughts in other places. So yeah, the water was really activated. But that was, a kind of year where still the larger picture of the future, wherever we're heading towards, or the present moment, was really under a shroud of total mystery. Now, the year 2023 is much more dynamic in different ways, and it also comes with its own duality. It also comes with its own, let's say, struggle. And of course, the specifics of this year, as you can see also on the screen, well, are given by the big transits taking place. Now, one of this energy is ultimately Jupiter transiting through the sign of Aries. Jupiter just freshly, at the end of 2022, re-entered the sign of Aries, where it retrograded out from, and now it's in 2023, in the beginning, it's there to stay, completing its transit. Also in 2023, leaving the sign of Aries and entering the sign of Taurus, and also retrograding there. But before we get there, Jupiter in Aries is very important for its expansive powers. Aries is very much about the individual, about the self, about everything that is fresh and new, and everything that needs to be created, needs to show up in the world. Because, Pisces, from Pisces onto Aries, Pisces is the ether, Pisces is the spirit, Pisces is the dream, the ethereal blueprint, let's say. And then, as the energy heads into Aries, it needs to be born. It's gonna be, I'm so sorry to use a poor choice of words maybe, but it is gonna be pushed out. Don't get me wrong. Whatever needs to be born, maybe because we kind of planted the seed not so long ago, the past 2-3 years and watered it intensely, so of course it's gonna grow regardless of what it is. Some of us might have really watered our illnesses, depressions, the more pessimistic take on life where we could not forgive certain things either we have done to the self, parents, life, the divine. All of our pains and hurts and disappointments and wounds can be, placed into that Pisces category. So, of course, some of us treasured that, even if, it's a bit cynical what I'm saying. But yeah, of course, we are going to be getting reminiscence and reverberations of that part as well. Whatever not so useful, beneficial, or nurturing to the self that we actually nurtured and fed and placed on a pedestal, well, that is what we're going to be seeing first of all on first hand. Because don't get me wrong, Saturn also enters into the sign of Pisces, completing Jupiter's path in 3 years, of course. So right now we only get the very, very beginning, let's say, of the energy, the first expressions, let's say, but it will already be very, very significant and revelatory because Saturn, the great karmic judge, well, it definitely means business. But then, after Jupiter finishes a job in Aries, it is going to be entering into the sign of Taurus, where also, as I said, where it will also retrograde. And in the sign of Taurus, it will be a totally different kind of energy. We are going to be feeling it very, very intensely because Aries is just fire, it is just the head, it is just the action, the move, the impulse, the fight, so to speak. Now, in Taurus, that's where we need stability, we need grounding. What is going to be birthing out of the actions we took while Jupiter was in Aries, or whatever it is that we initiated, well, that is now something that we, Taurus, have to work with, have to fruitify, cultivate. So yeah, Jupiter in the sign of Taurus expands, everything Taurian of nature, our value system, self-worth, etc., etc. All of that in order for us to, Jupiter's subjective truth, have power over our own values, to be our own values, because Jupiter is what we generate ultimately. And as I said, Jupiter in the sign of Taurus, well, it also invites us to return to simplicity of values, of core, I don't know, feelings, of how the relationship with the self, for example. And it is also a pretty good period when investing into healing, physical well-being, of course, financial stuff, property, building, agriculture, beauty, all of that is going to be a really good period. Now, the other element is Pluto, and this is going to be a massive, massive energy shift. We're going to be feeling this intensely. Pluto entering into the sign of Aquarius, touching it at 0 degrees, reactivating the great conjunction, the meeting of Jupiter and Saturn in December 2020, the great paradigm shift. Now, Pluto touching that not only will remind us of however we kind of saw life and felt and, everything in 2020, of course, but it also is going to evoke what it means for the future, because it changed our future plans, our future vision, even our future perception, because some things might have exited from our life, from our sphere of awareness, even customs, traditions, routines, things that we used to do. So the transformation and the change is very, very felt, without a shadow of a doubt. But since Pluto activates this very strongly, whatever is forming for the future to stay with us is also going to be, come to our awareness, better said. Now, collectively speaking, this is the intensity of Aquarius. On one hand, it will, really, really stir up the collective, the individual as the primary component, the cell, the smallest working functional part of the collective. So it will, along with Jupiter in Aries, it will put a great emphasis on the individual, your rights, your sovereignty, your liberty, your equity, everyone to be equal, everyone to matter, everyone to be included, the fair repartition of resources, and Jupiter in Aries, even rights, and and Pluto activates this strongly. But then, of course, it will give us a very, very good hint of what it is going to be doing in Aquarius in the next 20 years. And it will change us profoundly. But I'll get to the details of this when we'll get to the Pluto section. Then Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn to finish its job, the deconstruction of the old order, the old system, the old modus vivendi, basically, but collectively speaking, not all that much individually. Of course, it's based on the individual, but you get what I'm saying. And Pluto, as soon as it retrogrades back into Capricorn, it will soon hold a T-square with the nodes, so we're really, really going to be feeling this one way or another. Now, the nodal axis, so the nodes of the moon, also change signs. They go to the Aries Libra axis, and this also, from so very many different perspectives, this is wonderful because North Node in Aries. Time to take action. Time for, to truly not just dream it, not just think it, not just plan it, but do it. Self-belief, going, setting a direction and just following it through. No longer, over-analyzing. No longer overthinking. No longer even listening to others. No longer taking anything or anyone other than our own sovereignty into consideration. But of course, this is an axis, so there needs to be a certain kind of balance. Because South Node in Libra, okay, it is all of the complications that can influence one's sense of direction, opinion of others, the past. What your parents say, what your girlfriend says, what your boyfriend says, what your neighbor says, how things are in your culture, town, country, part of the world, continent. All of that in a way can be Libra because information and others, and we need to, the skills of justice when we make a choice or a decision, even in the smallest things, what my opinion, what my attitude should be in regard to something. That's also a decision. That's also an inner option. That's also, in a way, sorry, a choice. So yeah, that is going to be extremely highlighted when really sorry, I had to pause. This flu is really, really getting to me. But anyway, so the nodes of the moon into Aries Libra, they're really, really gonna motivate us one way or another to take action, make certain choices, do stuff, or, Aries the self. For some people, it can even be a really, really intense and powerful I don't know, invention or rebirth or remake or rebirthing oneself. Because, we cannot forget that Aries is the first breath after all. So, and the self. So, this North Node is gonna affect us individually in, ways that are so, so, so very distinctive to us, really, to who it is that we were born to be more than anything else. But naturally, the South Node in Libra, who we choose to be is 100% included in this picture, but that's the south node. So we need to, take what's good and put it to the table and somehow push what's not so good back into the closet if we couldn't eliminate it until now. And last but not least, another energy that seems extraordinarily important to me is that we do have a aneretic solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, and that's explosive in so very many different ways. But more about this later. Now, the best way I think I can present to you what to expect this year, if we just look at the most important planets separately and speak about their movement, their conversation, and what we can expect from them. And after we speak about the most important energies, we can have a much more retrospective overlook and speak about the more general things. So, of course, we have to start with the planet of action, the activator, Mars. So, at the beginning of the year, Mars is still in Gemini. It is still retrograde. But the first key movement after it, gets out of retrograde is that it will conjunct on the 29th of January the fixed star of Archangel Michael. And this is, a dual kind of energy, because let's see the positive side, because Mars is the activator, so it will be time for action. Well, it can be really good for improvising, solutions, for logistics, for travel, for breakdown of communications, for negotiating terms and conditions, especially, when people are like working groups are at strike or protesting or refusing to work, or there's a big, dissatisfaction with, something like Gemini, like mine and yours, and, but on the other hand, it can Mars, the planet of war, and this fixed star is very volatile, because logistics and certain big choices and communications, well, they can also be blessed as in aggressively. If you want to attack someone, if you want to, then of course you're blessed at this period. It will go like clockwork. You will get the best possible tactics and solutions, epiphanies even, how to cause chaos, strife, etc. So as I said, this fixed star can bless in so very many ways. That's why sometimes it's even considered as a malevolent star. Because Gemini, what you do with it is actually, if it's good or evil, not the nature of it. So yeah. So I do imagine that on the world stage there will be big breakdowns in communications, internet cutoffs, fall-offs. Maybe in certain countries they will ban a page or the whole of the internet. Fights for liberty, human rights, especially in the Arab countries. So Mars conjunct this fixed star is gonna really, really stir spirits up. Anyway, so then on the 23rd of February, Mars holds an important trine to Mercury, because Mercury at this time is going to be in Aquarius. Why I think this trine is important? Because Mercury is freshly out of retrograde, so it comes with the wrap-up. And Mercury in Aquarius, science, technology, communication, groups, within groups forming, for example, or, spirit, what they call spirit tribe. When Mercury is in this part of the sky, then there is action, communication, speaking, planning. Let's go together, let's do together in spirit tribes, circle of friends, local community, whatever you are involved in, and of course on the internet. So there is a good side to this as well. It's a trine, so of course there's just good sign, but the it could feel a little bit like way too much. It can be a bit stressful, because after all, it's, a Mercury trine, so there is action, there is communication, there is response, and it can feel a bit tiring. But in the big picture, it can be really, really good for anything that has to do with science on collectively speaking, and new communication about scientific breakthroughs, and it can give us a lot of solutions. Then on the 15th of March, Mars reholds the final square with Neptune, because, as I said, as soon as Mars entered into the sign of Gemini, so in 2022, it did hold a really challenging square with Neptune. So this kind of affected us where we didn't know what was true, what was not true. Communication went seemingly well, but it didn't do anything really. So we might have to rehold a lot of important, big, even soul talks, even anything that went through, usually in the winter of 2022, because as I said, seemingly it did get somewhere, but not really. And this final square between Neptune and Mars is going to clarify a lot of things, and it's not going to be easy because Neptune is also going to be conjunct, not to the degree with the Sun and Mercury communication, figuring things out, and the Sun illuminating everything, and the Sun and Mercury conjunction itself is also very prophetic. In Pisces, it's really, really about figuring your dreams out, or the feelings of another person, or where you truly want to be in life, or actually what Mars in Gemini, the rest of the world means to you. So this can be quite a big philosophical and spiritual energy, but at the same time also very, very practical when you need to set certain relationships, crystallize them, as in set them right, to finally have a moment of clarity which is constant for both or every member involved. Then Mars, on the 25th of March, it enters Cancer. No, Mars in the sign of Cancer, well, it is not very powerful, it is considered debilitated, but it does have a lot of positive effects to it. Empathy, care, the Mars in Cancer is usually the light worker, the nurse, the those who extend care and nurture and whatever unto those who are vulnerable. So it has a lot of good side, and this will of course will manifest on the world stage collectively as well, until Mars starts getting to anaretic Cancer, because that, along with Jupiter being in Aries, and Pluto preparing to actually anaretic Pluto in Capricorn, is not a very peaceful energy, to be totally honest with you, because Mars in Cancer, in if it's irritated badly, my domain, my territory, my culture, my language, my religion. So you can imagine, even within countries, even within, you know, politically devised geographical territories, there can be so much inner conflict due to ethnicity or any kind of collective Cancerian expression. So Mars can agitate there. Then on the 21st of May, it enters Leo, where it is very, very powerful. It loves being in Leo. It activates the heart, creative center, courage, etc., etc. But at the same time, every other energy is very tense, kind of. So this also highlights that there might be conflict, there might be tension on the world stage, of course, because this year 2023 can turn quite militaristic. It's quite aggressive. It's quite, aimed to reach a goal. So cooperation and diplomacy can only work so much. But as I said, it all depends on us, because this energy highlights the individual. So if we can apply like common logic, common sense, if let's say humankind is 100% of every individual that is included, if a good number are hell-bent on one thing, I don't want to say necessarily peace, but anything that has nothing to do with conflict and with, all that, well then Jupiter and any other energy in the sky cannot effectively translate to war in its classical sense. Struggle, competition, legal fights, protests, and all that where there isn't destruction, violence, death, and doom. Absolutely, but that is actually favorable because it promotes that everyone to exercit their rights. And then the first days of June, Jupiter does hold a square with the North. Sorry, no. Mars holds a square with Jupiter conjunct the North Node, and this is going to be really, really important because Mars is action, and Jupiter with the Jupiter expanding the North Node. Your goals are very important, are the most important thing for you there and then, but you can imagine collectively as well. So this is a moment of tension when we need breakthrough, but we need to achieve it diligently, peacefully, with great patience, and with a certain kind of meticulosity that Mars is not good, is not notorious for. Then on the 9th of July, Mars conjunct Regulus, the star of kings. So this is going to be very important on the world stage, I imagine, because we will hear something maybe scandalous or whatever about a celebrity, world leaders, royalty, king, and that can also be sometimes a game changer. So the 10th of July, Mars enters Virgo. So in the sign of Virgo, it's all about, fixing the nitty gritty, being embodying the energy of Virgo. All of us need to work. All of us need to, have Virgo-like standards. All of us need to sometimes, when I say judge, not to judge a person, but to make judgment as in what is right and wrong for me. Virgo does not allow the Piscean kind of, oh, well, everyone's a brother, everyone's a sister. No, this is where Mars and Virgo, you have to really, really decide and judge and see clearly who and what serves your life, your situation, your health, your immediate needs and whatnot. Person, situation, job, whatever. Then on the 28th of August, Mars enters Libra, where it is also not able to bring out his very favorable, most favorable qualities, but it's, good in a sense because what happens when Mars enters Libra? Legal cases, justice, trials, but also communication, diplomacy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it gets more aggressive, it gets confrontational, but it needs to be done. Then on the 12th of October, Mars enters in its ancient ruling sign of Scorpio, where it is very, very powerful. And then on the 12th of November, it opposes Uranus. Now, this is quite important and interesting because if you remember back in 2019, I do believe it was also somewhere around November, Mars held an opposition to Uranus, different degree but kind of similar configuration, and the COVID kind of broke out from the laboratory, or at least the news of it, Uranus, reached us. But this time, well, it is also conjunct a really, really, really malevolent fixed star, Alpha Serpentis. The true name I can't even pronounce, so don't even make me. And that is when, well, a surprise, Uranus. We'll have to see what happens and how to react to it, ultimately. But Scorpio, toxicity, poison, knowledge, empirical knowledge. Like, Scorpio is really, if we wanna ridicule it, the fruit of knowledge, or whatever Adam ate. It it has all the details, it has all the complications, it has all the facts and all the research, but it's not beneficial. It's not going to do anything good. And finally, on the 24th of December, it enters the sign of Sagittarius, and I do believe that that will be for next year's horoscope, what happens after, especially with Mars. So let's move on and speak about Jupiter, because Jupiter is the other planet who is making very I'm so sorry, important moves. So at the very beginning of the year, we find Jupiter at 1 degrees of Aries. So, and after the 9th of January, when Black Moon Lilith, and this is, I'll include her in Jupiter, that is also a very, very important energy shift of 2023. Because Black Moon Lilith activates the sign of Leo, and in her more primal, in her more aggressive, in her more instinctual expression. So it means kind of wild heart. It can also mean a pretty brutal heart, unforgiving heart, vengeful heart, needless to say. But it is what we make of it. So, I hope, really hope that it's not the case. Soon as, they activate, they hold a trine, so the trine is not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be all that very much, tight, but, Jupiter expands, and Aries, self-empowered, self-motivated, your justice, your truth, your faith, your desire, your whatever. And then Black Moon Lilith in Leo, the heart space, well, it comes like a temptation, like, of course, do it, you can do it. And, depending on your personality type, well, this can be the most positive and miraculous thing ever. Like someone who is very, very shy but has a beautiful singing voice, of course, they need this aspect to go on the X Factor or whatnot and, perform. But if someone is usually very confident by their design and is courageous and really loves themselves, well, they need to be careful, because this aspect is so, and even though it's a trine, so it's a trine, but a trine blesses you there and then, but what happens after? Now that's where, with Jupiter involved, it can be so and so. But let's move on. On the 1st of March, it conjuncts Venus, and that is also very important because Venus is the lower benefic, Jupiter is the higher benefic, so this can be quite fortunate, this can be quite positive, this can feel like a breakthrough, this can be really good for anything that has to do with personal image, changing personal image, harvesting the fruits of your labor, but not necessarily materially, or what you invested in yourself, now you can harvest in that sense, even though this energy is similar to a Saturnian expression, but Venus does that sometimes. And the two benefics meeting, so yeah, I would expect something quite favorable. Or this can also translate into, as I said, a psychological energy, when you're really, really motivated to keep to your path, whatever it is that you are building, doing, accomplishing, fighting for, striving for, under the influence of Jupiter in Aries. The presence of Venus can just make it that much more worth it, make it that much more, enjoyable. You are really, really determined to stick to whatever you're doing. On the on the 11th of March, it conjuncts Chiron, and this is a rather delicate energy, to be totally honest with you, because Jupiter expanding Chirons, collectively, an old wound is definitely going to be triggered, and collectively, historic events, shameful or bad or dark historic events, a reminder of that, for example. But personally, it's a different story. We all had our wounds, we all have our weaknesses, We all have, everything that basically would stop us in our path. And Jupiter, what asks us, well, what do we do with that? What do we do with our wounds? What do we do with everything that makes us vulnerable or fragile? Well, we can either use it as the greatest motivation in the sense that, well, I shouldn't have accomplished this or that because I was wounded. And look, I'm still here. I did it. Well, that means if I can do it, other people can do it as well. That already changes greatly the attitude, the mood, even the Jupiter worldview of what wounds do in life, for example. But the negative part is I was wounded and I was, you know, however the wound came to you, because this Aries can be in different places in different people's charts, so it can be any house. So the specific of the wound, but if another person, for example, wounded me with such great ease, why don't I learn from them and then go on a rampage? So, you know what I mean? This is what we make of it, really. And most aspects and most energies with Jupiter in Aries is really, really what we make of it. And I must emphasize and highlight, including the conflictual and militaristic part, especially collectively. If we don't want to see that playing on the world stage, then we must shut that off from within ourselves. That doesn't mean to be passive. That means to fight for ourselves, for what we believe in, because that doesn't leave any energy and place for to fight for something else. So then around and on the 11th of April, Jupiter meets the Sun. That is also quite a lucky aspect, a revelatory aspect when you really, really align to your purpose again. On the May the 16th, Jupiter squares Mars in Cancer. But I kind of spoke about this when I got to Mars. Mars is not by the degree anoretic, but slightly anoretic in Cancer, as I said. Everything that matters to us kind of is highlighted, emotionally, collectively even. My country, my culture, my language, my religion, individually as well, but in families. My. And then there is Jupiter, anoretic in Aries. So it really, really means business. What happens with the square? Well, there is going to be some kind of confrontation. Jupiter, legal, planet of law, it can be very much legal. And there has to come a resolution. There has to come a moment of peace, a compromise, something. Then on the 17th, Jupiter enters Taurus, so it kind of leaves Aries for good. And as I said, in the sign of Taurus, it's all about, well, you go back to whatever happened when it was in Aries. In Taurus, you make that, you work with that, you live that, you make that real, you hold it every day of your life. You build on that, it's for the long term. So this is when we are really, really pushed into serious mode to embody, to hold the frequency, our job, our career, our values, our whatever, but to do it, be there, and live it. And also construction. All the North Node has transited Taurus, so it already set a lot up, in so very many different ways. Jupiter going through the same path, it just crystallizes it. It makes it, that locks it in, let's say. And then on the 1st of June, it conjuncts the North Node. And the North Node is at this time, at the 1st of June, at 3 degrees of Taurus. So that will be really, really important. Exactly what I said. When whatever it is that you already have, because North Node in Taurus, it's physical, and it meets Jupiter expansion, you live it, you do it, you accept it, you feel that it's yours. So it's quite a really, really powerful grounding aspect. Now, of course, the Taurian matters. It can also be good for relationship, for physical healing, for sexual healing, for sexual whatever. Because that's also evolution matters. But again, Jupiter needs us to, have the control. Because Taurus is also kind of, it is what you make of it, but in different ways, of course. And then on the 4th of September, Jupiter retrograde begins at 15 degrees of Taurus, and then ending on the 31st of December at 5 degrees of Taurus. And this is so very important because this 15 and 5 degrees of Taurus are going to be highlighted not just by Jupiter, but by other planets as well. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also going to be an eclipse very close to this point. So these 15 and 5 degrees of Taurus are really, really emphasized. And last but not least, at the end of the year, so around 31st of December, Jupiter is going to be sextiling Saturn in Pisces. Now, you can imagine that these two planets manifest because Jupiter comes with the truth, comes with the dreams, comes with the divine purpose. Saturn makes it physical, makes it real, it tests it, it trials it, and if it's all good to go, it manifests it in a sextile. What you work, what you put into it, and in the sign of Pisces, this is where Saturn needs morality. It needs, you to truly embody your faith, whatever it is that you believe in. And this is where no judging really. Your faith is your own. If you believe in the destruction of the multiverse and that is your final goal, well, chances are that is also part of the divine scheme in one way or another. So yes, whatever you believe in, but with Saturn in the sign of Pisces, that's when you need to be in control of it, so to speak. So a sextile, a work aspect with Jupiter, it can truly, stir things up in a rather miraculous and helpful fashion. And that aspect is also really good for healing and for regeneration. Now, let's move on to another planet which is going to be very, very important, and it is Saturn, of course. So, for Saturn, we find Saturn as we enter into 2023 still in Aquarius. It is making its final transit through the sign of Aquarius, leaving it for good in 2023. When it begins its transit through Pisces for the next three years. But in 2023, we are still getting, at least according to my very subjective personal opinion, the more delightful, the more, Saturn, the father figure, the kind father kind of expression of this energy. So, on the 22nd of January, Uranus goes direct. And I know that it's not Uranus, it's Saturn, but this is very important even though these two planets are not connected. Now, Uranus is the ruling planet of Aquarius, and when it goes direct, it activates its own ruling sign as well. Saturn being in it and being the co-ruler of the same sign, and it's correct to say a few months ago, they held a square to each other, a long-term square, which was really difficult for all of us individually and collectively. So Uranus going direct will be like a memo, a reminder of all of that. So because Uranus will activate Aquarius, Saturn's expression in it will be a bit more intense. Then on the 15th of February, the Sun conjunct Saturn, reality check. We get this every year, so it's not, all that special. And in the first days of March, we have anaretic Saturn in Aquarius. Now, whenever Saturn, regardless in which sign is anaretic, it's not easy. Reality check, any kind of reality check is that much more severe. It is that much more, binding. It is that much more impactful. And of course, Aquarius, the collective. How will the individual, you know, come into harmony with the collective? This anoretic Saturn will definitely highlight everything that contradicts the will, the desire of the individual and that of the collective. So it will force a kind of confrontation. And anything that has to do with the internet, technology, um, electricity, everything that runs, but especially internet, humanity's collective consciousness. Well, this is when anoretic Saturn will show us a glimpse, not just a little bit, of the most dangerous and deadly sides of the internet, and what it ultimately invites us to change before Pluto changes it for us. So, on the 2nd of March, it's conjunct Mercury. This is when the reality check sinks in and we might get the plans, what to do. The 7th of March, Saturn finally enters into the sign of Pisces. And as soon as it makes, it goes forward a few degrees on the 13th of April, it conjuncts a very important and powerful fixed star named Fomalhaut. And this is the star of alchemy. This is the star of ancient wisdom. This is the star of Archangel Gabriel. So, this is, we're definitely going to be feeling this in so very many ways, shapes, and form, including collectively in the medical system, medical domains, anything that has to do with microbiology, research regarding hormones, blood chemistry, immune system. We might see some big reforms in justice where they might want to reform how criminals are treated, or what locking up someone or isolating someone actually means. So this is going to be interesting. And on the 17th of June, Saturn retrograde begins at 7 degrees of Pisces. And as soon as this retrograde begins, Saturn is sextiling Jupiter. So again, this sextile manifestation, it speaks about manifestation. Whatever we put onto the table, chances are either Jupiter or Saturn helps us live it, get it, be it, get there, or understand it. Then on the 4th of November, Saturn retrograde ends at 0 degrees and 31 minutes of Pisces. So going back to that 0 degree. And I also want to say, because there is an interesting energy at play in the sky, and this doesn't really have to do with Saturn retrograde, but as soon as Saturn enters into 0 degrees of Pisces, so around March, Pluto will be at anoretic degree of Capricorn. So it's almost like Saturn guarding Aquarius from the 0 Pisces, and then Pluto from the other end, 29 of Capricorn. It's almost like they're emphasizing deeply at the late degrees and the beginning degrees of their signs that all of this is for the long-term future, Aquarius, if you know what I mean. It's almost like these two planets for a short while are like the gatekeepers, like the guardians, the protectors of whatever Aquarius means, so our collective future. So I do believe that this spring is going to be so important for us individually and collectively, because, and Saturn and Pluto ultimately, they met at 22, 23 degrees of Capricorn in 2020, 13th of January, changing our world and normality and our collective forever. And you can imagine that this is still ongoing, and this will be a good part of that energy. So, and last but not least about Saturn, at the end of the year when it finally uh, advances into the first degrees of Pisces, when it conjuncts formal house again, it will hold another sextile with Jupiter, and that to me is very, very important and significant because these on and off sextiles between Saturn and Jupiter give us so many opportunities and second, third, fourth, fifth chances to truly, birth our futures basically. Now moving on to Pluto, of course. Out of all the planets, perhaps Pluto is going to be the most important for more than one reason. So speaking about Pluto, at the very, very first day of the year, it's holding a conjunction to Venus. So, this energy is kind of what we make of it because it can play out as powerful attraction, powerful magnetism, sexual or an opportunity, money, income, something that really, really interests you, or something that is the subject of your desire. Not only is it possible for us to, attract it into our sphere, but also to be very, very intense and to feel a bit all-consuming. Now, of course, this can also play out in different way, where something ends, something terminates, something that we loved, valued, have considered highly of simply ends, or we have to become aware that that reality is no longer present in our lives and hearts. So yes, be this can play out in more than one way. It can be either very, very powerful attraction, a moment of great intensity emotionally, also in not so favorable sense, especially, great attraction. Yeah, there is two people who are very, very happy with that great attraction, but there can also be a third person who is hurt or. So yeah, that's why, So on the 19th of January, it also holds a conjunction with the sun. This happens every single year, so it's not all that special, but it still is special because, we become that much aware of the intensity and the power that we need to have over at least one area of our lives in order to succeed and in order to make sure that we don't get the not so favorable surprises in the future. And on the 24th of March, Pluto finally, and for the first time, of course, touches that 0 degrees of Aquarius, where it will pretty much stay until it will retrograde out of Aquarius back into Capricorn to finish his job. Sorry. As Pluto enters Aquarius, it will sextile the Sun being in the sign of Aries. Again, an impulse, a motivation. This can be a window of opportunity when inputting effort, work, or psychological, emotional, even mental focus onto whatever we are wanting, doing, etc. Sun in the sign of Aries can pay off so very well. Or this can also be the moment. Remember that big attraction, or the opposite of it, the big heartbreak at the 1st of January when Venus conjuncts Pluto, or whatever realization this gives you. This Pluto sextiling the Sun might build something on that, might be a continuation of that. And then at the beginning of April, it does square Mercury in the sign of Taurus. I'm so sorry. Is really getting to me, but it couldn't stop me yet. So as I said, it will square, yes, it will square Mercury in the sign of Taurus, So this is when we kind of need to become aware of all the additional, details of what Pluto is conjuring up in the sign of Aquarius. So as I said, Aquarius, again, the human collective, our local communities, our circle of friends, wherever it is that we belong. But it can also be our individuality within that. So a lot of important areas are going to be triggered, and we're going to be in a way under pressure for us to see things, decide things, process things, react to things, and form opinions to things, people, events, circumstances triggered by this energy. Especially if Mercury squares it, we don't know what to take yet. It's too fresh, it's too new. We never ever been in this energy. And regarding Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, none of us alive today have ever felt this in a lived way. So of course it's kind of new to us, very very new. And as I said, on the 1st of May, Pluto retrograde begins at that 0 degree of Aquarius, and on the 11th of June it re-enters Capricorn, becoming again an erratic and grinding down until the 27th degree of Capricorn, finishing its job. Now, how it will finish its job, that is, for all of us to see. And all of us, of course, are actually parts of that. We are going to be like the little ants enacting this deconstruction of the old paradigm, but in which way we have to see. And another very important energy that will be on off is Pluto is going to sextile Neptune, while in Capricorn, of course. This sextile has been with us for so very many years, let's say, on and off. So we are kind of used to this, and this is the final window of opening to use that alchemy that or whatever, Neptune in the sign of Pisces. It has been there for quite a long time, so each year, spiritually, it did prepare us for something, to harness an inner power, or to learn something from the self, or to, anything of this nature, or to release a trauma, etc. And this, sextile with Pluto is gonna be like the final window opportunity to do something with that, or based on that, which spirit, our dreams, our own soul symbolically has been preparing us for these past, 2, 3, even 4 years. And then there is a really strong and tough energy, because Pluto will T-square the lunar nodes. So the north node being at anoretic Aries, or slightly anoretic, and then the south node anoretic Libra. Cardinal energy, Pluto is anoretic Capricorn cardinal, so that you have a T-square there. So this will be conflictual, heavily conflictual. This is when all of us will need to choose one way or another our collective future, but in a way that how it will enact immediately. We will have to choose immediately what we'll do next, even tomorrow, collectively. So collective reaction to something, or a collective initiation to a need that will rise up. But of course, Pluto at anoretic Capricorn, well, you can imagine that also evokes everything that has been going through in central governments, internationally, big corporations, economically, World Bank, HR, and every part of this in the past 2 or 3 years. So you can imagine that there will be big, big revelations. There will be big consequences as well. Because some people, this is like a just justice 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 aspect, where it promotes divine justice. So you can imagine that some world leaders, politicians, ministers, accountants, business people, big companies, organizations will have to answer one way or another. And then on the 10th of October, Pluto retrograde ends at that 27 degree of Capricorn, while squaring Mars in Libra, again a powerful cardinal energy. And squaring Mars in Libra, well, diplomatic conflict, or Libra, government and the citizens, they're not in unison, they're not agreeing. And Libra, the sign of justice, legal battles, change of constitutions, change of political system, entire political systems, or even entire legal traditions of certain countries. So big things are gonna be stirring up at that time, when at the basically the end of 2023. So moving on, I would also like to mention very quickly the remaining retrogrades, because we spoke about the bigger planet retrogrades. Now let's speak about the other, what we can expect in 2023. So we have Mercury retrograde. This is what we inherit from this year. So the present Mercury retrograde ends on the 18th of January in 2023. Then we have another Mercury retrograde at 21st of April, beginning and ending on May the 15th. And look at the 15 and the 5 degrees of Taurus. So Mercury at this, well, I would like to call first retrograde, because this one is, the retrograde began in 2022, so I don't want to include it. So at its first retrograde, it highlights the same degrees of Taurus, the 15 and 5, where Jupiter also retrogrades and touches, and at this 5 degrees, there's going to be a lunar eclipse. So the other one is August the 23rd, beginning and ending on the September 15th in the sign of Virgo, Earth sign. So you can see that all of these Mercury retrograde is going to be an Earth sign. Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo, and the final one will start in Capricorn. Sorry. So yes, it has to be very practical, and it will do a lot of down-to-earth things. Actually do. We will think, we will decide, we will communicate, we will plan, we will, even, architect certain things. And moving on to Venus, we do have Venus retrograde starting on July the 23rd at 28 degrees of Leo, and ending on September the 4th, 12 degrees of Leo. Venus in Leo, a heart. For some people, I do believe that this will be, am I going to be having children, or better not? Or I want children but not necessarily biological, out of my own body. So this will be deciding not necessarily fertility issues, but how or in which way would you like to use your creative energies for the future? And as I said, for some people, even the longer term future, because Leo child energy, some people will be in the age where they do need to kind of have a child now, or otherwise they will have to either appeal to technology or adopt. While for other people, it will be a big creative chaos, so to speak, new adventures that, well, in a way, they're not meant to end in a very ideal way, but they can lead to so very many interesting experiences, people that will stay with us for the rest of our lives. So, risking a tiny bit and trying out new and unusual stuff is encouraged, even if some, we might know that it will lead to, not a very interesting place, yet still the adventure of it can be so very interesting. So out of all Venus retrogrades, perhaps this has the potential to be as high as it is low, if you know what I mean. And then we have Uranus, the Uranus retrograde of 2023, beginning on the 29th of August and ending in 2024, the 27th of January. And finally, Neptune. Neptune retrograde begins on the 30th of June and ends on the 6th of December. So, moving on, I would just like to mention the most important activity of the nodes of the moon, because one of the big energies of 2023 does involve the nodes of the moon. And as you can see, on the 18th of July, the nodes of the moon move into Aries and Libra axis. So, as I said, the North Node into Aries, the self, birthing ourself, for example, finding the energy, finding the initiative, the drive, the willpower, the logic, the common sense, everything including, because Aries is the head after all, to have our own beginnings, to go on our own path, to make a choice, to set an intent, to set a path, and not look back. This is very motivational, singularly driven energy, focus driven energy, warrior like energy, with also Jupiter in this sign. And Jupiter, well, actually, Jupiter does meet the nodes of the moon, the North Node, sorry. So Jupiter expanding it even that much further, well, this will truly mean a period when we have to invest every energy and put everything into the table to birth the self and understand this in every way, shape, and form, because obtaining our bigger goals, our immediate purposes, justice in our lives, fighting for justice, fighting for what we believe in, fighting for what is necessary for us, fighting for another person, making a move with another person. It can be a romantic energy as well. You take the initiative to express your feelings to the other person and not exactly give up if they at first don't receive it all that well. That can very well be a expression of this energy, which can lead to a lot of success, a lot of accomplishment, as long as we don't overdo it and as long as we don't make it aggressive. And the first expression of Aries, hatred. Like a warrior can be fueled by all types of fire, to be totally honest with you. And needless to say, this year the ruling planet of Aries, Mars, will be also in Scorpio. So yeah, Scorpionic Mars is very intense in perhaps even the not so favorable ways. And speaking about the nodes of the moon, well, one of the bigger energies and aspects besides meeting Jupiter is the T-square to Pluto, but I spoke about that. And then the eclipses, of course. One of the most important, in my opinion, eclipses of this year is going to be on the 20th of April, where we have a total solar eclipse in Aries, 29 degrees of Aries. Now, the North Node is not yet in Aries. It is very close at 4 degrees of Taurus, so almost in Aries, because the nodes retrograde, so they move backwards. That's why it will enter into 29 degrees of Aries eventually. But, it's very close to the node, so it's a very active and quite precise eclipse. And yeah, 29 degrees of Aries is what kind of rings the alarm bell, because it's militaristic energy. 29 is aggressive, 29 energetic Aries is pretty explosive. Like, it's truly an explosive energy, and it can also play out as explosion for real. It can also play out as even seismic activity, so to speak, because in 2024, so much later on, there will be a meeting of Jupiter and Uranus in the sign of Taurus, and perhaps this will simply prepare it. This will be like a hint. This will be like premonition to the, quite physical, of course, but in which shape and form it will manifest, that is, yet to be seen. Um, and this 29 degrees of Aries eclipse, this can be important in so very many different ways because it's a north node eclipse. It kind of says you need to fight for this breakthrough, and you cannot run, you cannot hide, it has to be confrontational. Now, physically speaking, on a world stage, let's hope it doesn't mean that any kind of war and conflict escalates. It can very well mean that peace is created, forced peace, 29 degrees of Aries, why not? That is also, or something big is decided or won in a court of justice. Because Libra, Libra, the South Node is going to be moving into Libra very soon after this eclipse. So whatever happens here might, trigger a new justice. I don't know how to even express this. It might kind of trigger a new legal custom or a new way of looking at solving certain cases in the courts of justice, including internationally. But anyway, I'll have more about this eclipse at the time when it will take place, because Jupiter is also near the eclipse. And what is also very special about this eclipse is that Vesta is conjunct the North Node. So, just a moment, if you give me a second to look at my notes, because I think I spoke about this, I wrote about this in greater detail. Or actually, let us just look at the star chart of that date. So we are looking at the 20th of April. So here we have Vesta conjunct the North Node. And Vesta ultimately is sacred fire, so fire. Then we have the moon will be here because it's a new moon. Eris and Jupiter are actually they're conjunct. That's also an Aries, that's fire. That's very strong fire energy. And we have Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Leo. That's also very strong and intense fire energy. And we have the ruling planet of Mars ultimately. And then that means that the eclipse as well in the sign of Cancer. And Mars in Cancer, as I said, it is the energy of frustration, passive. Mars, don't get me wrong, Mars in Cancer can be hyper aggressive passively. So Mars in Cancer has such a beautiful modus operandi because it can, let me just give you an example. There is a big party and there's like 100 people in it. One Mars in Cancer person who is masterful can ruin the mood of everyone and can just stop the party, not just there and then, but never ever to be held again. That kind of party. So Mars in Cancer is passive aggressiveness, and the most, not, it's not even scorpionic toxicity, because the Scorpio stings you, of course, you kind of, you kind of feel the pain. Mars in Cancer, on the other hand, you won't know that you're stung or poisoned or targeted until it's too late. So, you know, when Mars is heavily frustrated, not good. And I might be saying a big stupidity now, but chances are Mars might also be out of bounds at this time. So, yeah, it's not a most peaceful energy and eclipse either, but an eclipse is a reset, darkness, total darkness. So it can also end the conflict. It can also end any conflict. That's why I'm very, very hopeful that is exactly what it happens. And why Mars in Cancer, people, well, if people say the conflict ends here because we are the citizens after all, it has to end. So then we have on the 5th of May a lunar eclipse in Scorpio. Then the other eclipse season at the end of the year, October the 14th, another solar eclipse in Libra. This is going to be also quite powerful. And then but this is a south node eclipse. And finally, on the 28th of October, we have a lunar eclipse in Taurus, 5 degree. So that 5 degree, 5 degree of Taurus is really, really activated all throughout the year. So basically, this concludes the bigger transit of 2023. It is going to be an incredibly intense and interesting year when more things than ever before depend on us, the self, our sovereignty, our inner authority, and Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Whatever it is that we hope, dream, especially daydream, fantasize about, but this is where it's not the silly, stupid fantasy. This is where it has to have a touch of divine. As in, you know, I can fantasize that I live in a big mansion and have swimming pool or whatever, and Saturn will not really take me seriously. But if I fantasize that, how wonderful would it be this tree outside my house to have a birdhouse in the spring? That is like something that Saturn can very, very, very quickly enable and enact. So I know this is a bit dichotomous in nature, but if we try to daydream with a certain kind of logic and rationality to it, what can manifest and what is totally impossible, that wisdom can take us so very far this year. Because, as I said, Saturn in Pisces, the ethereal, the not so real, the totally surreal, well, it becomes real. Like, let me give you a very good example of Saturn in Pisces. Star Trek, but back when it just appeared. Like, in that age, to speak to someone, like this, as in to see the person and have a real-time conversation, that was so very much sci-fi that, like sci-fi, proper sci-fi, people and our technology wasn't even close to actually enabling it. Even if it was, because let's admit it, it was. People weren't ready for that. So what did Saturn do? We kept on watching the series, the movies, and then that kind of fantasy was, you know, uh, how should I, adapted by so very many other movies, so it became part of our collective fantasy. Surprise, surprise, very quickly we got the phone with camera and stuff like that. That's one very real example of how Saturn can very quickly turn a collective dream, also an individual dream, of course, into reality as long as we work towards it one way or another. So, Saturn, a planet that is responsible for, karmic equilibrium, so to speak, karmic justice, karmic fairness, what should be allowed into manifestation and what should be blocked out. Like, for example, bad intent, etc., should be blocked out, shouldn't it? So, all of that is gonna be so very, very highlighted, spiritually speaking, in 2023, and our spirituality and immediate spiritual goals are gonna be very, very based on, how should I say, Saturn's expression of Pisces, where we need to be seen fairly in the eyes of the divine. So we will do everything in our power for our souls, spiritually, morally, in any way, shape, and form that has to do with, the inner world, to be fair, correct, and for us to embody that which is truly authentic and real to us. May that be feeling, may that be spirituality, may that be philosophy, may that be worldview, may that be relation to the self. We need to embody it. Whatever it is that we believe, we truly need to hold it quite strongly together, and not just 2023, because Saturn is going to be making much more important spiritual connections in 2025. So until it transits the sign of Pisces, this is more like the more favorable expression to it. As I said, Fomalhaut, it enables us to get the good stuff, but we need to proceed with great diligence and with maximum morality, because if we do that, then we make sure that as Saturn in the coming years, when it reaches the end degrees of Pisces, we can only get something that we truly work towards in a positive way, and not necessarily, as I said, the restriction, the whip. And Pisces, well, it rules hospitals, prisons, confinement, isolation, mental institutes, so we should not really get into that. And Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, Aquarius, well, we must expect that as soon as Pluto touches that 0 degrees, we, in our own unique way, but no living human being is an exception to it, is going to be sucked in, absorbed into humanity's collective consciousness. For 80% of people, of course, that will be the internet, where people will need to take ownership of their portion of the internet, because it's humanity's collective consciousness. It's everyone's. And if you want the internet to be in a certain way, free, fair, equitable, protected, child-friendly, etc., you need to own it. You need to make it your own. You need to sovereignize your portion of it. How that will be enacted, I don't know. Who knows? We never had this energy and expression ever before in our existence. How do you take ownership of something which is only merely symbolically you? But for other people, for the rest 20%, that's where Akasha becomes real. Like the other internet, which is going to be more real than the internet. It's going to be great in that sense. But as I said, we must be very, so very, very, very careful not to allow this energy to turn into war, like proper war, destruction, strife, hurting other people, other beings, or whatever. Because, as I said, I must repeat this because it is so, so important. Both Jupiter and the North Node in the sign of Aries means that everything depends on you. Saturn in the sign of Pisces, the sign of finalities, even that means that everything depends on your soul, a healthy unconscious, a healthy spirit. So if Aries comes with that which kind of is in your hands, and Pisces comes with that which is indirectly just in your hands but under your spirit, that means pretty much all depends on us. And Pluto comes with the human collective and the individual as well. So these are times which are gonna change absolutely everything. 2020 and the great changes started Denver. One nuance, this is when we get to the proper individualistic nuance. So it's gonna be a year that we're not gonna forget. And it's not even gonna be that important because 2024 is gonna be that which truly changes everything. So I do hope that you enjoyed this long and really, really boring, and I'm so sorry for my coughs and mess ups and all of that, but you know, this is what it is. Thank you so very much for staying with me. I do hope that it wasn't very boring, and thank you so much for listening to me all throughout the year. Thank you for all the love, all the support, and I'm wishing everyone a truly blessed and empowered and really, really, really sovereign, take everything into your hands 2023. And the fate of the collective does depend on our own, and listen to this, individual happiness. This is when you need to fight for happiness as well, because happiness means the harmony of the integrity of the being. So it's happiness was never, ever, ever more important than now. So thank you, and I do hope that you enjoyed it. Until next